Conversation with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In Podcast. I'm Max Rabin.
And I am Brent Jackson.
Brent, today we have an old friend on the show, Greg Schneider. Greg Schneider was with Compass here in Washington, D.C. He worked on the Jenn Smira team. Jenn Smira, we had her on the show recently. Jenn Smira is one of the top-selling agents, top-selling teams in Washington, D.C. And then I guess during the pandemic, Greg and his partner moved out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A lot of people did that kind of migration thing during the pandemic, but they picked a really nice spot.
They didn't go to Annapolis or Middleburg. They went all the way to the Midwest.
To the West.
Yeah, I mean, it crossed our mind, but yeah, Compass had opened an office here. I think their 2-year anniversary was this month. And we said, hey, let's try it. I said, if I'm going to restart my career, I'd rather do it at 42 than come out here. Because we had talked about retiring out here, and I would much rather kind of get boots on the ground and start earlier than be in my mid-60s trying to make something happen out here.
So what was the drive for Jackson Hole?
Jake has been coming here his whole life. And when we first started dating 8 years ago, he brought me out here for a summer trip to meet his family. And it did something to me. It was hard to explain. Obviously, it's beautiful. There are endless things to do, whether it's summer or winter, but there was just something that I couldn't wrap my head or my hands around, but it just had like a magnetic energy. So from that trip, we scheduled a winter trip, and 2 trips a year turned into 3 trips a year. We ended up getting married here, and then ultimately we just had this kind of heart-to-heart decision where Jake was able to work remotely, and the opportunity for me to kind of step into this role without having to sever from Compass DC was available. So we were like, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
So with moving to Jackson Hole is really known for ultra wealthy, incredible luxury properties. Are you working in that at like ultra luxury level, or is there a normal market there? Tell us a little about the market in Jackson Hole.
The market is quite interesting. It's been a very eye-opening experience. It is black and white different than DC. Everything here is pick it up, shake it, and put it back down. And it took me the first 6 months of kind of navigating. I have a phenomenal office. I have open door policy with all of my colleagues. They're great. They're always available as a sounding board. So coming into this, Jake and I knew the cost of what it was to live here. The Q1 stats just came out recently. The average single family house is $4.5 million. What is considered the luxury market here starts at $5 million, and then goes, northwards of one of my coworkers in my office that has been a really good kind of mentor for me. They sold a $51 million ranch 2 months ago. 2 years ago, they sold a $75 million ranch. And these are scenarios that were sold in a period of 90 days, 4 months. So it's interesting to kind of see that level. I currently have 3 clients that are, one is in the 4 million range, the other is in the 10 million range. But I'm also used to DC, where we would do 25, 30 transactions a year. Here, if you do 8 to 10, you're doing very well. And so that's been something that has been hard for me to wrap my head around, because I then look at, well, what do I do for the rest of that time? How do I occupy my time? How do I make business in a small town that is very well connected, and I'm the new guy from DC?
So let's dive into that, because to me, that's fascinating, right? I mean, you've got a great group of business. You've been doing it for as long as I have in Washington, D.C. You've got a strong core of client base. You're on a phenomenal team. You up and moved to Jackson, Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So tell us, like, how are you finding business? Like the transition, like, did you start a team, start on your own, door knocking, cold calling, flyers? Like, kind of walk us through the ground up.
Yeah, and to be candid, there have been a handful of times that I've sat in this office and I've sat at my house and said, "What the hell have you done? Like, why did you do this?" And from the personal side of it, I love this, but from the professional side, I've liked it because it's forced me to kind of rattle my cage. I mean, as you guys know, I've always worked on a team, always, and teams in Jackson are not a thing. And it took me 4 solid months of talking to other agents, talking to people to see if they would collaborate, to see if they would work together, all with a friendly no. However, with the door always being open, and it is very, very much relationship based. If not all, I would say 95% of this is relation based, and it's mainly with feeder markets. There's no such thing as an open house here. They don't do it, which was hard for me. That's where I got most of my business from. There is little to no new development, which is also kind of what my niche was in DC. So where I've been able to I have to get out of my comfort zone. And I have a joke where I say, you should criminalize small talk. I hate small talk. Here, that's the way you make business. But
It's all, yeah.
I mean,
It's all chit chat and like, meeting people like out and about. And
totally. I mean, my favorite restaurant in town is the Snake River Grill. It's phenomenal. If you're ever here, I recommend you going there. But it's one of those scenarios where you have to sit at the bar by yourself and eat dinner, and I don't like that. I don't like talking to someone. I don't like that. The only nice piece to it is that most of the people you meet out here and the conversations you have, they're very authentic, deep rooted conversations. And then the person ends the conversation with saying, "Oh, I'm the CFO of Lehman Brothers," or "I am, I just flew in on my private jet. I'm flying back to California." Like, it's never led with that. It's always, "Oh, what are you doing here?" Or, "I'm at my ranch riding a horse." So for me to be able to kind of belly up to a table with someone of that caliber, I don't think that would ever happen to me in DC ever. So it's kind of blind faith in some respects,
right.
but it's just a different demographic of people that isn't the fast-paced type A personality. They know more than you do. They're going to question everything you do. They're here because they love the place. It just happens to be that they also have a lot of money. So I think building that trust with them is really what gets you in.
So what about some other avenues? Are you doing any flyers, like a farm area that you're working, social media?
I do. So Jake and I live in a neighborhood that's about 10 minutes south of the town square called Rafter J, and there are about 286 homes there. So I'm kind of hyper focused on the 3 block radius of my home. And then I send a mailer once a month to the entire community. And it's basically very similar to what I did in DC. I would do like basically 2 mailers a month. One would be an informative one, and the next would be a call to action. Um, Again, I've been doing that campaign for 4 months. I've gotten no response for it, which is expected. Um, it's more so, I threw a happy hour at my house 2 weeks ago. I invited 10 homes, 6 of them showed up. Average age of 70 years old. So it was like an interesting scenario, because I feel like had I done that in DC in my condo building, I would have had maybe one person come. So this is much.
Yeah, I think of like obviously you're in a Western state, you're in a Western location, and even with all the high net worth individuals who are there for their leisure time and doing the things that they really love to do, you're still in an environment where it's a friendlier atmosphere. I've always found that whenever I'm visiting the West, anywhere in the West, and so that's especially like Jackson Hole. It's all about like those conversations with people. I find when I go to a place like in Florida that's mostly like wealthier people, they're sort of on their vacation. They're happy to be like chit chatting and just being there. And they might be a type A person somewhere else, but they're not like that there.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. But going more into the market in Jackson Hole, like how is the market there right now? I mean, obviously the market everywhere has accelerated incredibly over the last few years. Obviously, the more urban markets, they fluctuate based on supply and demand. I'm assuming Jackson Hole is just always super high demand and things just keep trading higher and higher.
It does. And I fortunately, even in this short period of time that I've been here, so this is the 1-year anniversary this month of us being here, and I've been licensed for 10 months. But I was fortunate enough to come into this kind of when the market had started to shift. And what we were seeing is there's no real need or demand for you to move here or move away from here. There's nothing that's driving it. And you also have homeowners that this is their second, third, or fourth home. So what they'll do is put the house out for an aspirational price, but they don't care to sell. And if a buyer 4 or 5 months ago didn't feel there was value, they wouldn't move either. So we were at a stalemate where buyers weren't doing anything and sellers were like, why would I do it? I can turn around and rent this house for $25,000 a month. I'm not going to take a loss on it. So that was the thing that kept coming up in my sales meetings. We have a meeting every Wednesday and it's heavily attended. And the agents would always preface with, okay, I have a real seller. I have a real seller. I have a real seller. And I would dig into that asking, what is a real seller? And they said someone that, has a motivation, has to move, has work, or really just wants to get out of Teton County, which is basically Jackson Hole. But you have that large group of people that COVID, as it did everywhere else, blew the roof off of this place. And it was already expensive. So now you're looking at people that bought 5 or 10 years ago that are making 4 or 5 times what it was, but they don't have to sell. And they'll let the house sit there for 7 months vacant and just use it in the summer.
Why not? If you're at that level,
well,
why not just?
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, I feel like I've been able to, going back to like getting clients, like one of the clients that I'm working with now, I was able to kind of relate with him by just telling my story. Like Jake and I were not in a position, ultimately with one income, his only, to come here and buy a house for $5 million. We couldn't do it. We were able to go, and part of it was luck of timing, but I was able to go and buy a home 8 minutes away from the town square for $1.6 million. And so like telling that story and having that conversation with someone to say, you can get into this market and there's ways to do it. That's when I think that's, at least with my one client, how I got his attention and said, we can, he has more means than I do, but in terms of you just can't get caught up in the numbers of, oh my God, it's $5 million. I'm never going to be able to afford it there. And there's also another avenue that I'm exploring, kind of new business oriented, was in terms of workforce housing, which is very different than like what we're used to in DC. But there are a bunch of programs in town, which it's embarrassing to say that, low income housing here is like, you have to make less than $130,000 a year. But there's opportunities to get into a new construction ground up condo for $279, for $300,000. You just have to know the avenues to do it. And I think a lot of people don't, or don't have the resources. So that's another kind of initiative that I'm getting on board with, of helping that client get their piece of it, so that that's kind of their leveraging tool to stay in Teton County.
So comparing that market to Washington, D.C., you get a new listing, you can do Facebook, Instagram ads, flyers, glossy magazines, open houses, broker opens. Can you share with us what it's like if you get a new listing there, like kind of the protocol with, launching it to the public?
I can, because it's painful. And I ask so many questions and everyone in my office says, why would you do that? You know the level of what is expected from, I don't care who you work for, Sotheby's, Compass, anyone. You guys know what the checklist is. It's painful here. There is no such thing as staging. No one does it. No one will pay for it. There are no stagers at all. If you use a professional photographer, that's a perk, which again blows my mind. I mean, some of the photos will have, someone will launch a house in July and there's a Christmas tree in the photos. And the response back is, they're going to buy it. It's going to sell. And my response is, but my name is attached to it. My reputation is attached to it. My client's attached to it. So here it's a very different, it's agent by agent as to how much or how little is done to the listing. But it, again, It's a photo shoot. It's obviously here, there's land, so there's different pieces to it, surveying, aerial shots, things of that nature. But aside from that, it's really, I mean, there are no open houses. You have a broker's open on Wednesday, brokers see it, and that's it. So you have to figure out other, obviously, you don't just put it on and say, I hope it sells. That's not how success is done here. But a lot of it is truly relationship based, picking up the phone, calling agents and saying, hey, I've got this.
So you're talking about moving there and buying a house for in the $1.6 million range, and talking to other people about it. There are other ways to sort of get into this general location that don't cost $4, $5, $6 million. Is that a potential for you to reach back to some of your clients out here in DC or on the East Coast and to say, like, thinking about Jackson Hole, you know, just different ways to get them to look in your neck of the woods, right?
Completely. And so one of the brokers, his name is Mac Mendenhall. He's the one he's been a great mentor to me. He and his partner are the number one in our office. He said something similar. He was like, go back to DC. He was like, pick a really high-end restaurant, call the brokers that you know, that you like. He was like, don't try to sell people, be authentic, and just tell your story. Tell your story to these people, because then they can articulate that back. And there's really an extreme amount of value here in terms of what you get from, obviously the purchase prices are higher than what is expected, but the return on your rental investment is insane. And it's going to be that way indefinitely. I hate saying we're recession proof or we're in a bubble, but we are. It's similar to DC in that mindset, that there is always going to be a level of security that's here.
Well, yeah, I think of Jackson Hole as one of like the key luxury markets in the West. I mean, it's like Jackson Hole, Vail, Aspen. You know, it's on the list of all those major ones.
Who's your competitor, right? Like Max just read it all three. Like I'm thinking, like it's either Jackson Hole or maybe Aspen.
So
it's like what is Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket.
So it's Aspen, but do not ever say that in Jackson Hole. So there are people now. I mean, so the billionaires are pushing the millionaires out, and the reason they're coming here is because it's the more untouched, beautiful landscape that's never going to change. And there are some jokes that go around saying that this is the new Aspen Hole, and if you say that in front of a local, they will pull a handgun out on you. Because the whole joke, literally, yeah, literally. The joke is money talks, wealth whispers, and they said Aspen is very loud with their money. Whereas Jackson Hole, I mean, Harrison Ford lives 5 minutes from my office. He's here probably 8 months out of the year. He has an 800-acre farm. He and Calista Flockhart, he drives a Ford Ranger pickup truck and goes to Whole Foods. In October, Lady Gaga was in Whole Foods with her mother. I'm trying to like find a way to get a photo without looking like a freak. But it's one of those scenarios that people of that caliber can come here and kind of live their life.
Did you get the photo?
I have a slight video that I'll send you. It's pretty grainy, but she's a small little woman.
That's great.
Well, that's the name of her documentary, is 5'2" or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
The other piece too that I didn't know until I really dug into the real estate here, which explains the supply and demand issue. Teton County, which is where Jackson Hole is situated, only 3% of that can be privately owned. The remainder is owned by the Park Services. And so therefore, another 1% of that is tied up with family trusts and big land trusts. So there's, the top 8 families that have been here forever have tied up multiple, thousands and thousands of acres for their family alone. So when you look at it, we're looking at basically 1.8% of Teton County can be purchased by you or I. So when you tell someone, especially someone who is ultra wealthy, who loves this area and loves it, that they possibly can't have it because of that, that's just more of an incentive for figuring it out.
That's scarcity. They like the super wealthy. Anything that's super scarce, they're into it.
They're in. I mean, right? I was thankfully, again, this office is extremely open arms friendly to any questions I have. A transaction is taking place right now that it was 2 parcels of land, piece of dirt, for $24 million. And it's just, I was very lucky to be privy to pieces of it and be a part of a few Zooms with a few attorneys. But it's just fascinating that people will spend that amount of money without batting an eye. And it's for dirt. And it's going to take 5 years to build a house on it. But they're like, this is Jackson Hole. Like, this is worth it.
We went to Jackson Hole a few years ago. It was probably like 5 years ago. But the one thing that I noticed was everything is authentic. Like, I can't remember if there was a McDonald's or something there, but if it did, like, everything has to conform to the style and architecture of Jackson Hole.
That is correct.
So that was really interesting.
It is. And for me, it's a love-hate coming from the East Coast because there is nothing. And for McDonald's to come here was insane. They opened a Target last year and like the world almost shut down. Like the town was furious. Everyone was pissed off. So you kind of get the clashing of it, but I completely understand it too, because there are people that I've had conversations with that were like, I've been coming here for 74 years and I can go to the same spot that I went to 60 years ago and it is exactly the same. And that's what people are buying into, because that will be this way forever. And nothing is ever guaranteed like that, especially in an area like this when it comes to real estate. It doesn't happen.
So this is going to put you in a spot, excuse me, like there's an inventory shortage, everywhere in America. Sellers are staying home, but with 1.8% of the land in Teton County, can you quantify that and how many transactions that is in a calendar year?
So yes, last year, Teton County traded 312 homes total.
Wow.
When I got
That's insane.
That's scarcity.
This is when I was like my third month into this, and I was like, well, I'm going back to DC. This has been a good run. Because in turn, also with the COVID boom, there are 732 licensed real estate agents in Teton County.
Yeah. Wait a minute. So let's do the math. Okay. So
Yeah.
7.
One
right.
house, 2 agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody gets one deal.
Easy math.
732. Now, again, you guys know how many agents are licensed and how many agents actually sell is a very different thing. But if you look at just the math of it, that's what you're competing for. And that's why when I talk with other agents in my office, they're like, get this number out of your head. I'm like, well, for my first year, I want to do 20 transactions at $1.5 million. And they're like, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. They're like, if you can do 5 transactions, fantastic. And why not fight for the transactions? A normal buyer here is 3 to 5 million. So they're like, do those 5 transactions at that price and get the business moving, and you'll be fine. The other piece too is that a lot of owners that have owned here for a decade or more own many, many properties. So it's one of those domino effects that if you do a good job and you have a good rapport, they're going to call you to sell this piece of land or to sell this house or buy this piece of property. So it's always like a domino effect with just one client that could result in upwards of $60 or $70 million of business.
So with 312 transactions in a calendar year, DC is very strict with their pocket listings, private exclusive, marketing it out. But to me, that's a prime market for, if there's only 312 traded properties on the market, if you get something, could you shop? Like, how does the private exclusives work in Jackson Hole?
I'm happy you brought it up because that's the other piece that like blew my mind. Wyoming is a non-disclosure state. So we are very similar to Manhattan, where very little is ever public. So this goes back to having your relationships with your brokers, whether they're inside or outside of your company. Majority of the properties that you see, unless it's legally signed by the seller, will never be disclosed the final sales price. So it's always zero. And also, if I, as an agent, ever post anything on social media that shows what the closed sales price was, I could jeopardize losing my real estate license as a result from it being a non-disclosure. So it's truly, without kidding, it's like the wild, wild west when it comes down to, and I've said this before, the caliber of the property you have and the brokers to go to. And you'll typically, it's very similar to you guys, can't put it on social media. You have to have it live by certain dates, but I'll be very candid. This is Wyoming. It's I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but yeah, I mean, the enforcement of it is slim to none. But I think the last stat that came out for Q1, 42% of transactions are done off market.
But that's another aspect of the allure of being there and owning property there and living there it's not like Manhattan or DC where everyone's like all up in your business, right?
Correct. And for the nosy person like me, it drives me insane because majority of these are in trusts that are buried. Wyoming is a very trust friendly place and you can't just Google and find out who this is. So it's very it's interesting. And it's very difficult to actually reach that individual person because everything here is a PO box or everything is sent to the person's office in California or the office in Texas. So the days of just writing a note or knocking on a door doesn't happen here, or it rarely happens. Thank God my neighborhood actually has mail service, which is only like one of 4 in this town. So I can pay someone
You can literally mail to people
to do that. Yeah, but it's getting in front of that person or getting that contact information is clutch. That's the hardest part.
So what would you recommend for a buyer that wants to come, a second home in Jackson Hole with only 312 traded a year, 42% are off market. So it doesn't sound like you can just go on Zillow and wait for something to come on.
You don't. And that's where actually we as realtors, it gives us such an edge, in my opinion, because this perfect case in point, I have new clients that are looking for land. They have a budget of $2 million. We're looking everywhere from town to 45 minutes south of town. And I went down the hall to a broker of mine who specializes in Moran, which is the area they like. He said to me, I have 4 options for you. He was like, they're not on the market. This is my client that said I would sell at this price. This is it. And I was able to send those 4 items to this client who's now, over the moon. Timing is on their hand. The client's getting their piece and it's happy. But that's how business is done here. What's usually put on the market has typically been raked through who they think the brokers can sell it. And then it's the next level of that, which is even more fascinating to me. And Jake and I went through this when we bought our house. What I'm used to as competitive in DC is not competitive here. A competitive bid here, 9 times out of 10 won't even be list price. It'll be below list, which blows me. And
That's interesting.
And then when I tell people, in DC that people will go $500,000 or $600,000 over list with no contingencies, their head spins here. So they're like, the normal here is 96% to list, and then full contingencies, a home inspection, things I've never thought I'd have to do out, like water inspections, surveys, like stuff that is foreign to me coming from a major city. But it's fascinating, and it's not one of those scenarios. It was in the thick of COVID where it's on the market and it's off the next day. Here, people take a week or 2, and then we'll pull the trigger. Even if there's multiple people circling, they're not going to be, you as an agent, you're not going to accelerate that process. It's going to happen when they want it to happen.
This is going down a rabbit hole, but I'm thinking, how do home inspectors, do you have to get a structural engineer out there? Because I'm thinking you said 49.5 feet of snow this calendar year. Like, how structurally sound are the roofs to hold whatever if it's 20 feet at a time or whatnot, to hold all that snow?
Well, we went through that same thing on our personal house. And obviously the construction standards are different here. The insulation standards are different here. And in our roof, it's like, I don't know, every 11 inches, 12 inches, there's another truss. So it shows, we made it through one of the worst winters here ever. And there was, I would say, 6 to 7 feet of snow on our roof for 6 months. But they're kind of mastered in knowing where to look and what to do. But you do have, it's not a scenario where you have a 2-day home inspection. It's typically like a 10 to 12-day home inspection contingency to get someone on site.
Well, let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to your DC career and talk about the origin story a little bit. How did you get started in real estate and when?
I worked for Bozzuto as a leasing agent in beautiful Baltimore City. And I actually rented apartments to leasing agents that worked for McWilliams Ballard. And they were selling a really nice high rise in Harbor East. And I hung out with them a couple of times and kind of picked their brain and kind of mirrored what they were doing and was in all of it. It was a beautiful new construction building. It was in still a very nice neighborhood in Baltimore City, and just continued to kind of pick their brain. And that led to digging into checking in with Chris Ballard, talking to them, seeing if there was an opportunity. And ultimately there was, and started selling. And this was in 2008, which was a great time to start in real estate. So I was selling, helping them sell that building, and then another one just on the outskirts of Baltimore City.
So what brought you down to DC?
So once one of the buildings went rental, and then the other one the one in Harbor East did sell out. And I was kind of at that point where I was over Baltimore. Like, I'd been there my whole life. DC's DC, it was cosmopolitan. There was more money, and it was just helpful. It was kind of similar to Jackson Hole. McWilliams Ballard was based there. It was just like an easy progression of, I have to go there because my business or my office is there. And then when I came, you have to kind of work your low man on the pole. So I had to sell some stuff in Virginia before I was able to do DC stuff.
What was your first building in DC that you sold?
Oh my God. I'm embarrassed to say this because it's not even DC. National Harbor, when it was dirt, when it was we were in a trailer, and it was the first building out of the ground. And then I helped with 555 Mass. That was like the first.
That's a big building.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tamor.
Yeah. So in DC, you were talking about you always preferred to work on a team. Why was that? Like, why when you decided to like break away from the new condo sales, did you want to make sure that you were on a team and not try to work on building your own team or doing your own thing?
It's funny because I've been forced to have that mirror conversation just recently because it's not an option here. And I think part of it was the comfort and the security of it. I liked, when I was on Rob and Brent's team, I think we all worked individually as a group with our own business and collaboratively excelled. I think the same scenario took place with Jenn. So it wasn't like a scenario of, here's handouts, take this business and run with it. It was more of, okay, what can you bring to the table? What can we collaboratively do? And for me, the marketing side of it was covered. Like, I am blind when it comes to that. The contracts to close was covered. I'm blind with that. So the back end support of it, I liked. And I also liked going into maybe a listing that was a little above my pay grade, but having the stats of my team and having the support of my team helped me immeasurably. So it's hard now at 43 years old, having to kind of step up, brand new market. I can't be on a team, and I've got to figure it out. So the rattling of the cage, put me on through that emotional pace. And now I'm at the spot where I'm embracing it, and I actually am looking forward to it.
Why do you think there are no teams in Jackson Hole?
My personal opinion is just due to sheer volume. I mean, again, the number one singular agent in my office, who I adore, she's in a book club that I'm in weekly. And I said to her, I said, what did you do volume wise last year? And she said, I sold 16 homes, and she's the number one agent in our office. So I think there's not enough. I mean, I think there are people that will argue this comment, but there's not enough business here to warrant having a big team. If you're doing 10 to 15 transactions a year, you can handle that. And it's a different animal. People like to tour here in the afternoons. People don't do business at night. People don't do business on the weekends. it's a different pace. So you can kind of still, you can live a normal life and still have a successful business, but I don't think that it's spread far enough, at least if you stay in Teton County. Now, if you cross into Idaho and neighboring states, yeah, it's a little different.
Well, so did you know that the market was like that before you went there? How much research did you do before you left DC?
Should I tell you the, should I lie or tell you? No, I had an idea. But then I also didn't understand. I was also of the mentality how we are in DC. I'm like, well, I can just do the rental market for a while. Like people rent out here for so much money and I'll get $10,000 per transaction. And they don't. There is no rental brokerage out here. There never will be rental brokerage out here. You just do it as a courtesy for your client. You blast it out to other brokers, and that's just the cost of doing business. There's no compensation for it. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
considering the amount that people are getting in rent for no compensation.
Going back to my girlfriend, Lady Gaga, she spent $110,000 a month, and she was here for 6 months. So
yeah, I would assume there's some mega properties there that are definitely in that kind of range, because it's a super luxury lifestyle that you can live there.
Totally. But again, the other piece to this too, and that's where I kind of have found solace, that I can sell 5 houses here and make a very substantial living. So it's just figuring out, there's certain agents that will have that big pop and the first thing they're thinking about is, let's go to Mexico, let's do this. Whereas kind of my mindset is, okay, how can I capitalize and market on this? How can I, like the day that it closes, be blasting this out? Because you have such a short shelf life to get exposure on it. So I think it's how you run with it. And that's how these other teams in my office, and I use the word team, it's 2 people, have been so successful. Because they're like, you can make a ridiculous amount of money here, but it's very scarce and you have to be on top of your game constantly and kind of work from there.
Do you do a lot of like blasting agent-based cities, meaning like DC, Austin, Texas, LA, like all the Compass agents? Because I would think you're going to get a lot of leads from the agents. Like we have a client in Washington, DC that wants to move to Denver, wants to move to Jackson Hole or whatnot.
I do. And there is basically like social media based videos, those little like 5 to 10 second blurbs, and then paying for those to be blasted in the feeder markets. California, Chicago, and Texas are the 3 biggest markets here. So it's just kind of getting that FaceTime in front of it. And it's shocking how the response that you will get. Like one of my current clients is someone that he and his wife were here from Texas on their Sprinter, and they just walked into the office and wanted to talk about real estate. So those things happen here. As far as the other piece of it though, because there is so little, like you can't come here and think that you're gonna, Redfin it and walk out and go and buy a house FSBO. Like it doesn't happen. So that aspect of it, of like inbound calls or inbound emails, those don't happen.
So no floor duty?
Floor duty-ish is what it's called. Yeah. You basically
you're in your office now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but you said it's like people could just drive by and pop in. I mean, you're in town there.
100%. And right now, so we were just in mud season. Mud season goes from the middle of April to the middle of May. So just last week, we're like back in action. Like everything is open. People are out of control, crazy. I love it. For me, I get small town, but then I get 3 million visitors per year. So like the town of Jackson's 10,700 people. And the people that I become friends with are amazing. It's a very small knit town. There's tons of activities that happen, but then we get this influx of literally 3 million people per year. That it's a love-hate. People hate that it's traffic. They hate that it's busy. They hate that they can't get a reservation, but I love it. It's me being able to not be stuck in a small town, because I wouldn't be able to survive in a town that was 10,000 people for my whole life.
So okay, so talking about like the life in Jackson Hole, like you just mentioned mud season. We have I don't think Brent.
You go mudding.
Yeah, like so. Talk about like are you living the Jackson Hole life? Are you guys horseback riding? Like what are you guys doing? Like tell us about Jackson Hole life.
So mud season is the time that everyone leaves here and goes to Mexico, basically. Everything melts and it's disgusting, and you can't go hiking. We tried to go hiking on Saturday, and it wasn't pretty.
You got muddy.
You get muddy. But yeah, so yeah, contrary to what people think about me and my urban life, living out here, we embrace it. Like hiking is insane. We have paddle boards. All the lakes here are crystal clear, like you're on an island. We do biking, horseback riding, not so much. Skiing, cross country skiing. We have a bunch of friends. There's a handful of country clubs here. So then all the golf courses are turned into cross country ski courses in the winter. So there's always something to do here. And even in those areas, like for me, I think it's nice. And during the mud season or the off season, it's quieter and like you can kind of regroup, refresh, and then 30 days later, you've got a whole new season and you have a whole new group of people and you have whole new opportunities. Like for the summer here, now it's all the concert festivals are happening. The food and wine festival is happening. There's a mountain in town that all the concert series is on the top of the mountain. So you have this spectacular view with, great options of things to do in a small town. And they kind of stack it up since we have such a short period of time that it's actually nice outside.
Do you miss your DC life though? Like with sitting in traffic on Rhode Island Avenue and people yelling at you at the corner of P and 14th. Like, what do you miss all that?
I only miss the people. That's the only thing I miss. It's when our house, the owners before owned it for 16 years. At the settlement table, they did not have keys because they have never locked their doors. Now, I still have DC in my blood, so that's never going to happen. But there is no crime here. It's interesting. It's fascinating to me.
So what's a typical day like for you? Seeing that there's only like 12 transactions a year, 312 for the whole community. Like, what's your day look like? Waking up all the way to the time you go to bed.
I'm a morning person by default. So in DC, normally it's 5:30-ish in the morning, and I would do the gym. But here, I'm still 5:30, but I'm in the office, and I like to do my morning into the afternoon is work on my work. The afternoon is work in my work. So it's kind of getting out. I'm actually refreshing my life and doing ninja training right now. And I did it in DC and kind of did it just to do it because someone told me to do it. So doing it now where I need to apply those skills has been profound. So kind of following what seems like such a trivial thing and writing a letter, writing 2 letters, writing, daily attributes, those things that I would in the past say, this is so stupid, I'm never going to do it. I'm actually embracing and I'm seeing why the science behind it actually works. So that's typically how I spend my morning. Contacting people, getting my CRM in order. I mean, if you don't have CRM, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, real estate is a hobby to you. It's not a career. If you don't have...
What CRM were you using?
I actually use what Compass has.
Okay.
So it's a platform. Before it was very unorganized and it was a spreadsheet, but it was still just a level of something that I could touch every day. But I feel like that is an integral part of you being successful. And especially here, like I obviously have tons and tons of contacts in DC. If I pull up my CRM here, I have 14. So those 14 people, I'm still, they're getting a touch 2 times a month. They're getting a newsletter once a month. And here again, it's just, do you want to get lunch? Do you want to do something? And that's where it's the most profound. But again, it's not painful, which I like. It's not small talk.
Is there anything that you want to share with us about Jackson Hole that's like, that maybe some of our listeners don't know about Jackson Hole that's off the beaten path?
So there's a thing called a sloshy, and it's basically they're big here. They're usually at like a busted liquor store or a broke down gas station, and it's like a Slurpee with liquor in it, and you basically get a bunch of sloshies, and then you go and you float the river. So you'll take a raft or you take a paddleboard and you float. Flat Creek. I wouldn't get on Snake River because you'll die, but there's a bunch of the little rivers and creeks that float through town, and you just start at one end and you make a day of it.
I feel like Jackson Hole, maybe I'm wrong, you tell me. I feel like Jackson Hole and some of these other places are like for I'll call myself the average traveler. It's like you hear about it, you see pictures, and then you go there. There's no way to really experience it. Like you're really living the life. Like that's why you visited there, and now you're like, screw it, we got to move here, and we got to like know what this is like every day. Am I right?
You're totally right. And that was our goal coming into it, because I said to Jake, I'm like, I don't want to be this stupid tourist. Like I want to figure out where people are going, what bars, what restaurants. And fortunately, it's like now that I have such a rapport with people in my office, which again, the average age here is like 29 years old, so I feel ancient. They're the first ones to tell me. They're like, what the hell are you going there for? No, go to this bar, go to this restaurant, or this event's happening, or the blues festival is in Star Valley this week. Bring a tent. You have to spend the night there. So like those things, again, I think are invaluable and would also make me love this town, because no one advertises here. I joke about it. If something is happening, they'll put it on like a story on their Instagram, and you have to screenshot it for the date and the time that it's happening. And when you get there, it's all the locals are there because that's how things are advertised here. Or they'll put a sign up that says disco party Tuesday at 9. That's it. There's no date. There's nothing else. And I hated it when we first moved here, and now I kind of understand and love it.
Pretty cool.
One last question. I mean, bears, snakes, moose. Do you have some of this like running around in your neighborhood?
Well, we do have the never-ending moose. Now she has a child, and she uses our landscaping as a buffet. There's no snakes here, thank God. But yeah, the summers here are great. There's no humidity, so there's little to no mosquitoes. The moose will tear you up. Grizzly 399, she's like a well-known woman around town. She just came out of hibernation actually 2 days ago, and every year she has another litter. So she only has one kid this year. She had 3 last year. But like now the grizzlies are coming out of hibernation, so you have that bear spray when you're hiking, which I'm going to probably blind myself with one day. But yeah, so it's just kind of knowing like those things that I would never think of before in the past. Like, oh, okay, I have to take bear spray for the next 2 months because I could get mauled by a bear, or watch out. It's, the bison will be here at this time, and steer clear of a moose, and how to react. I'm like, how do I know what to do? So thankfully, my militant husband knows what to do, because I'll just be the one running and screaming.
And those are the most dangerous moments you're probably going to get if they ever happen.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Funny.
Well, Greg, thanks for coming on today and sharing everything about Jackson Hole Market and, transitioning out there. Transitioning is always a weird word these days.
I was just going to say.
It's like, let's just say yes. Moving to, okay?
We just transitioned out of COVID era yesterday, right?
But no, seriously, like, I think there's like, for realtors, you got to be a little brave to go step into a new market. You could certainly move. You can move wherever you want and try. But I think it's really cool, and like I think that for other realtors who are thinking about like, could I move somewhere else? Like if I have a dream of living somewhere else, it's possible. You can go learn a new market, and you're in a tight market. That's a small market. I mean, if you were in even a slightly more urban market, you could take a lot of the tools that you've taken, but it seems like you've really adapted already to this smaller market.
No, and I appreciate that, because it's again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy walk, and I have this internal conversation regularly, but if it's worth it, it's worth it. And for me, this is worth it. The whole reason I didn't get rid of my DC license was that in the event this did go south, that I would come back. There's little to no probability of me coming back.
Right.
I do want to give a
I love the success story.
I do want to give a plug to Mark Loam because he's amazing. And Mark has introduced me to so many people out here that have turned out to be amazing friends, like lifelong friends. So I love Mark Loam.
And Mark Loam is the CEO of our company, TTR Sotheby's, and his family has a long history in that part of the country, right?
Yep, he does. His father, from the early 80s, has helped develop land out here. And fortunately, Mark's building a new house out here that I stalk all the time because it's beautiful.
I'm sure it's amazing. If Mark's doing it, it's got to be amazing. So,
but yeah, thanks for having me on, you guys. I was nervous, but I enjoyed this.
Well, now Brent has some really scary questions for you. Some rapid questions.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
So since you're in many people's favorite vacation spot, where do you go to vacation outside of Jackson Hole?
Oh my God, Roatan in Honduras.
Oh,
Honduras. Okay.
I wouldn't have known it unless you had said the country. Well, wait, Roatan. So, I mean, a lot of people go to Central America. They go to like Costa Rica is usually the big one, right? So why Honduras? What's going on in Honduras?
I had never even heard of it until my old colleague Elvin got married there, and we went, and it's #1 rated for scuba diving. It was like earth-changing. The water is crystal clear, the people are amazing, and the scuba is, I've never experienced something like that.
Good to know.
What is your favorite after-hour drink?
Tequila and soda.
Tequila and soda. Who would play you in a movie?
Oh, Cardi B.
Cardi B. That's a good one.
She'd have to work on that character though. It's like some method acting.
So you have a lot of music in your life. If you're driving down the radio, this song comes on. You start singing as loud as you can. What song is it?
To Jake's dismay, Morgan Wallen. I love country right now.
Of course you do.
I love it. I go from Cardi B to country, back and forth.
Interesting. You know Garth Brooks down in Vegas.
Oh, he is? I was just in Vegas.
He's in Vegas.
Damn it.
He's doing a residency.
He's got a residency.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So out of all the things you can do in Jackson Hole, like what's your favorite thing to do as a hobby?
Paddleboarding on String Lake.
Paddleboarding. That's good. This is question number 6, but for our listeners that want to visit Jackson Hole, is there a go-to hotel that you would recommend?
If you're going to stay in town, the Cloudvale. If you're going to stay in the Village, either Continuum or the Four Seasons.
Good deal.
Greg, thanks again. And we're always talking about charitable organizations on our show. Do you have any charities that you'd like to give a shout out to that we may make a donation to?
Oh, you caught me off guard. I don't at the moment, but I will work on that.
Okay. Well, thanks again for joining, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you,
Good
Greg.
to catch up, man.
Thanks. It was good seeing you guys as well. And come out if you want.
Thank you.
I've got space.
I might have to come out there. I'm excited.
You're welcome.
Sounds awesome.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at keyedinpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.